Welcome to another episode of Close Mode, the Enterprise Sales Show. I'm Brian Dietmeyer, and I'm really lucky to be here today with Paul Butterfield. Paul is the CEO of the Revenue Flywheel Group. He is also the executive board president of the Revenue Enablement Society. Paul, welcome.
Hey, Brian, it's good to be here. It's funny you said borscht because we were just talking about Hungary in the pre-show. I think it was. I don't think that was a mistaken slip, right?
No, it wasn't. It was a Freudian
Yeah,
borscht.
but good to be here. Yeah.
All right. So I have to before we get into the business. You and I are both fans of the Keys, as we've talked about in previous discussion, Florida Keys, and also Buffett fans. And I just learned that you're going to be a guest DJ. Is it on the Jimmy Buffett radio show?
It's Radio Margaritaville, Sirius XM. It's his station.
That's so cool.
So yes, I get to go on, make my own set list, tell some stories about my connections to Jimmy's music and those particular songs. And all I know is right now I got to get on the song list, and they said we want to have you on as one of the early. They call it, fruitcakes is what they call it, right? So early fruitcakes, early next year. So stay tuned. I'm guessing January, early February at the latest.
That's so fun. I will listen when you're there. So, all right. So this, in addition to Jimmy Buffett and the Florida Keys, this show is about all things enterprise sales. So in our pre-interview, one of the things you talked about is that sales training is broken. That's my paraphrasing of it. But can you tell me, you could state it more accurately if I didn't say it right, and tell me why do you feel that?
Well, I mean, to put it in perspective, I grew up in sales. Enablement came along about 12 years ago, but I grew up in sales, led sales teams, thought that's what I'd always be doing. And sales training, in my opinion, was always broken. I mean, Brian, you grew up in sales. I mean, how many times have you sat in a training in a classroom at a mid-rate hotel?
Yes.
And just watch this stuff, right? I mean, this is pre-Zoom a little bit, but my point is, it's always been broken. And the reason I say that, not in every case, not in every instance, but there's still, in my opinion, too much focus on product and features and demos and pitch decks. And you can't blame the sellers, because most of the time that's how they're being trained to run discovery. Show a pitch deck, show a demo, maybe ask a few questions. So not just to focus on the discovery phase, but in general, there's a lot of that training that must still be out there, or at least there's not training that's counteracting it and showing sellers a better way. Although a lot of companies are making progress, but man, there's still a lot to do.
Yeah, you had mentioned, showing up in demo, and I probably read my first articles on demos being death 10 years ago, right? And we're still, you're not the only one. We're still kind of complaining about that today, that we haven't rectified that. Yeah. So what's the solution to that?
Well, I mean, the solution to fixing the sales training, start with that, is maybe even stop referring to it as sales training. And here's what I mean by that. Years ago, I heard a quote, and I can't remember who said it now, but it was said that you train animals, you enable humans. And so just even taking a step back and thinking, okay, sales training is a component of the overall customer journey enablement that a company should be building out.
Yes.
But what I've seen is when people call them sales trainers or just it still tends to create silos. In fact, it can even create silos within, the enablement team.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, that's the first step. Words matter, and figure out what is it that you're really doing. Now, there is some times where you are doing, hardcore training, new product release, company was just acquired. There's that sort of thing, but it needs to be surrounded by the other elements of enablement and just be part of that package.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you started your first response with sitting in a mid-grade hotel, listening to someone spew at you for 2 days. And it's interesting that, to a sad degree, it's kind of the accepted model, because I've been doing a lot of these podcasts and interviewing a lot of folks, and I heard almost exactly the same story, where somebody said, look, I sat there for 2 days while someone sprayed with a fire hose. And the real reason my peers and I were all there was to get through that so we could get to cocktails in the evening.
Yeah, right. And hope it's not a cash bar. And it may not be in person anymore. We may be doing more of it on Zoom or other ways. but it is, yeah, there's still a lot of opportunity for improvement. It's interesting because, or I should say, any success I've had in enablement, I really do trace back to the fact that I grew up in sales,
Yeah.
led sales teams for
Yep.
Microsoft and
Yep.
Intuit and some other companies. And so when I was asked to go figure out what enablement looked like at the company where I was working, I sat down with my peers, the other sales VPs, sales directors that I've been working alongside when I was still running my team. And we just got to brainstorm, said, all right, you know what? The complaining stuff's today. Bill's given me his objective, but carte blanche how we get there.
Yeah.
And we just did a big whiteboard dump on what should enablement look like. So when you don't know, sometimes you get lucky. And I tried to carry that sales leader view all the way through to today.
Well,
So
what was on that whiteboard that you think where you got it right?
well, for example, when we were coming up with training for new hires, right? The
Yeah.
onboarding, that sort of thing, we decided that rather than have product people come in and do the product reviews
Yeah.
and training and that sort of thing, that we actually would have our SEs do it. Because the SEs knew how to talk about the product in terms of what problems it was solving. They had those conversations with prospects and customers every day. And
Yeah.
we felt like that would give the salespeople, these new salespeople, more context into the product as opposed to just a straight up product training. That's one of the
Yeah.
things I remember. And none of
Cool.
us had ever seen that before. So we thought it was new.
Well, I think on sort of a more strategic level, you mentioned something last time we spoke about
Mm-hmm.
sales enablement adopting a revenue centric approach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, it goes back to the story that I just told. When coming into it for the first time, it's like, well, if we're not influencing the seller behavior and therefore revenue, we're doing it wrong, right? And I
Okay.
just didn't know how else to look at it. And so if we fast forward to over the last decade or so, the technology has gotten a lot easier to measure that, but
Yeah.
it's still critical to find that correlation. Now, what I caution people because is please don't use terms like ROI. You cannot calculate a true ROI on enablement. What you
Right.
can do, and then you lose credibility, right? If you're trying to talk to anybody in the
Right.
C-suite, especially the CFO, knows what a real ROI is.
Right.
But what you can do, what you must do, is the same thing we teach sellers to do, but identify what the gaps are in the rev org from current state to future state, and then figure out how do we fill those gaps, and then measure to see that it actually did have an impact. But correlation over time does build that credibility. But there's just too many market factors to even straight up say, oh yeah, well, we cause win rates to go down. Da da da. No, you probably were one of things, or win rates go up. So be a little careful about that. But I don't want to diminish the fact that you've got to be measuring it. You've got to have ways to talk to your executive team about it in the terms and the language and the numbers they care about. They don't care about how many people showed up for your trainings. What they
Right.
want to know is what happened from it, right? So
Right. And that is the revenue centric approach.
it is right at
Yeah.
the top of everything. You're trying to figure out how do we correlate to revenue? What are the right areas of revenue? Because you can just say, "Hey, we want to increase sales 32%." All right,
Yeah.
but let's break that down. What does that mean? Okay, it might mean more cross selling going on. So we'd want to be measuring a greater mix of products on quotes or sales. It might be involve raising the average contract value. It might be bringing B players and C players up to having a shot at quota. There's a variety of ways to get there, but all that's the key is come up with three that you can measure and then focus on those. And then, then you get into enablement frameworks and all of that, but those then feed the strategy map, which is going back up to revenue. So you never should lose sight of that.
I go back to my first VP level position at a Fortune 50
Mm-hmm.
was building a national account group. When
Mm-hmm.
national account or account management kind of was new, right? There was
Yeah.
sales,
Yeah.
and then there was this new
Right.
thing: strategic account, global accounts, national accounts, and I became part of the Strategic Account Management Association. I remember a lot of discussions at the conferences about
Mm-hmm.
what is this function? What is what is the ROI, or at least the correlation
Yeah.
to some kind of
Right.
revenue or growth? And
Right.
I feel like they figured it out. I've been around long enough to know that I was there when account management started, and there was a whole thing about how do we sell this to the executive suite, and
Mm-hmm.
what is it
Yeah.
even, and how
What
do
is
we
it?
pay
Yeah.
people who do it? And I feel like the sales enablement, now revenue enablement, society maybe 10 years behind, and not because they're doing something wrong, but
Hmm.
because like account management started a long time ago and they figured it out. And I've often felt like that revenue enablement professionals and the society could
Hmm.
learn from looking at something that went before them, like introducing account management. How did we get it up to the C suite and those kind of things?
Hmm.
Is there any hope in like benchmarking against how did other functions do this well?
That's a great question. We don't have a current project to do that, but I'm
Yeah,
intrigued by the idea
yeah,
of putting something like that together, especially with some of the partners, the research partners we have access to.
yep,
So yeah, no, now you got me thinking about that. Uh, however, the revenue part of the what you said, that shift from sales enablement to revenue enablement,
yeah,
was really an organic one that
yes,
that a lot of us just saw happening in the marketplace. And I mean, chief revenue officer, well established position now. I don't remember the last time I heard of somebody being the head of sales ops. It's rev ops,
yes,
and
yeah.
so we should be thinking about enablement in that same broad spectrum way approach.
Yeah, and I wonder for folks who are listening who are not familiar with that shift, see if
Hmm.
let's play stump the consultant here and see if I got this right. I
Sure.
was trying to determine like what are the basic differences between sales enablement and revenue enablement. And it's funny too because one of the writers flipped those words and said, "Well, are you
Hmm.
enabling sales or are are you enabling revenue?" And revenue is end to end, right? It's before the lead and it's all the way through to renewal. Where sales enablement
Hmm.
is just in one piece, and that was the clearest kind of
Yep.
illustration to me. Does that sound about right?
That's how I look at it. Some people are calling it, GTM enablement, but the phrase that I coined and I actually trademarked, so I'm sure somebody else has come up with it somewhere, but nobody
Right.
wrote it down, is customer journey enablement. And I've
Okay.
started using that
Mm.
expression with prospective clients or even in the corporate environment when I was
Yeah.
working as a VP, because they can visualize that a little better than even just revenue enablement. I'm not saying we should change the name of the profession, but I'm just saying that, yes, that absolutely represents how I look at it. And it also is why my company's named the way it is.
Yeah.
Just you align all those little things, seemingly small things, across all the go-to-market teams, all the customer-facing teams, however you
Yeah.
define it. You are going to create a flywheel effect, and the outcome is typically a better customer experience, less focused on your product, more focused on them, more focused on their success metrics. CS team that's aware of why they bought is helping them measure, make sure they're getting what they need to out of it, and they're helping them solve the problem. It's just because of a very different experience.
Yeah. I wonder. One of my favorite books. I'm not business books. I'm not sure how well it sold. Was Aligning Strategy and Sales by Frank Cespedes. He's a Harvard lecturer, and
Hmm.
the entire book's about sort of that gap between executive level strategy and how that's there
Hmm.
are pieces of executive level strategy that can be executed by the sales team one deal at a time.
Hmm.
Not all of
Hmm.
executive level strategy, but his frustration is that there's a disconnect often between those.
Hmm.
And I can go to a kind of real life story. I was speaking with a executive vice president at a company who said we just bought one of our big competitors in Europe, and now that expands our global footprint. We're going to be able to compete better. And I asked him how long before words were coming out of reps' mouths that were
Hmm.
effectively monetizing the investment, in acquiring that competitor. And he said, best case 6 months, expected 9 to 12. And
Hmm.
so when I think about Frank's book about this lack
Yeah.
of connection, and then I hear this street level story, I feel like that is the role of enablement. But there still seems to be a gap between
Yeah.
strategy and revenue enablement, playing in the middle down to the tactics level.
There's a few things that could be going on in that story that I've seen or could see happening. I've been, as an enablement leader, been part of nine acquisitions at three different companies,
Okay.
and some were as small as 50, $60 million tech fold in. The
Yeah.
largest one was 450, $475 million. So had some real employees coming over. And what I have found is that there are a variety of things, systems not talking to each other, right? They're on HubSpot, we're on Salesforce. I mean, there's a lot of things that could go into that
Yeah.
delay of seeing time to revenue. However, if I focus on what enablement and revenue leaders should be doing, that is one of those opportunities where an enablement team really can step up and show some strong correlations early, because typically you've got a group of salespeople coming in. that are used to selling maybe just one product, one or two products. That's what their company's traditionally built. You've got the team that's already there, comfortable with what they're selling every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to blow up their sales mojo trying to learn something new. But the reality is you have to. So that enablement needs to have a strong playbook, right? And it starts
Yes.
with going with the CRO or the head of RevOps, find out what is the go-to-market model for this, right? Are they going to operate as an independent team,
Yep.
reporting up as they are for the first year? But are they going to integrate right away? But once you know those things, then yeah, it's not a difficult playbook and project to plan out. How's cross-training going to work? How are we going to measure that? How we bring these teams? How do we support the sales leadership in whatever level of integration that they need? And my teams have done really well with that.
Yeah.
But as I say, but acquisitions get so messy. I've also just seen some hair raising stuff that it just happens during acquisitions.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah.
For sure. So I was speaking with a executive at
Mm-hmm.
Salesforce.com, and in the course of our discussion, she said that she felt like sales enablement was about to undergo what did she say, a radical disruption.
Hmm.
What do you think of that? Do you think it's true? What is why being disrupted? What is the disruption?
Yeah, it's interesting because some people have been talking for the last year or so about the concept of revenue enablement
Yeah.
and correlating business impact as if that's the big and revolution enablement.
Right.
From my perspective, that's not a revolution because, again, coming from my background, that's the
Yep.
way I've always built it. That's the way I've always
Yep.
looked at it. And I know others have too. So I'm not the only one. So some people are looking at that. I don't think it's that.
Yep.
That will be disruptive and is disruptive for a lot of folks in enablement that maybe don't come from the same kind of background that I do. I'm not saying you have
Yep.
to be a ex-salesperson to be a good enabler, but then how do you fill those gaps in? You got to understand your ICP and your ICP or sales teams if you're an enablement pro.
Yeah.
So and sales leaders. But I think what I expect to see is more and more of the mundane or the creation exercises that enablement teams do, where you've got a large company, you might have a couple of people minimum tasked with sitting there creating curriculum and
Yeah.
designing it and all of that. AI is getting better and better at it. Right? AI is able to go, you learn how to use it properly. I've seen great demonstrations of this, and it will go and write a training script.
Yeah.
It will go and write. Now, you need to still, I don't trust it 100%. I would still go
Yeah.
back and modify, but it can even create a training deck. You've got your talk track for the deck. You say these are kind of graphics I want, the voice, boom, it'll go create the deck. So those things are critical and are going to continue needing to be done, but there will be more and more opportunity to turn that over to the AI functions.
Yeah.
And what does that mean for enablement? So it should mean that you now have more time on your hand. Or translation. Oh my gosh, Brian, I saw the coolest thing the other day where a training video in English was almost instantaneously, just a few minutes, turned into a training video in Spanish. It even manipulated the speaker's lips so it looked like
Right.
they were speaking Spanish words.
Right.
It was really
Yes.
cool. So again, that is going to free up time for enablement folks. So the disruption is figure out how to get in front of that, or you won't be relevant for very long.
Yeah.
And then number two, also be thinking about what else, should the enablement team be doing that right now may not happen because of lack of time.
Yeah.
As we turn these things over, it should disrupt how enablement teams are built, how they're executing, and perhaps even what some of the roles on the team are. Maybe you end up with an enablement role, a role on an enablement team that's specifically, running AI.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see. But that's where I think the big change is going to come, and people have to realign and rethink how they're executing.
Yeah. I think it feels so vast to so many people
Mm-hmm.
that it's like starting with there's so many opportunities with AI to do so many cool things,
Yeah,
and I
there
think
are.
that to me it's like one of those challenges where like I have too many choices. Narrow
Mm-hmm.
it for me, and I can move forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. That I was telling you about the virtual AI and sales session summit that I attended a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
One of the speakers there that really intrigued me talked about the need for building a blueprint of what you want to do with AI, what are the outcomes, et
Yeah.
cetera, before bringing in any AI. And
Yes.
her experience in working with companies is that many are just rushing into it, and that's why I think it stuck out to me so much. She's just stepping back and say, no, make a blueprint. Let's be smart about it. And I found that a really compelling session. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot to it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And There is an analyst I was speaking to who kind of lumped AI tools into efficiency and effectiveness tools, which
Hmm.
is also a helpful way for me
Hmm.
to say,
Yeah.
what aspects of AI can you use to free up time for busy work,
Right.
and what aspects
Yep.
can you use to, like, especially in sales, to make aspects of the sales cycle more effective.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, no, we're just seeing the beginning. It's going to be, as AI becomes more and more part of our CRMs and RevOps analysis and that sort of thing, which all should be feeding into how enablements prioritizing and looking and what they're looking at doing next, that sort of thing. It's just going to get better and better.
Yeah, I love the idea of a plan, because
Yeah,
it
yeah,
just struck me when you said that
yeah.
a lot of people are grasping, like, oh, there's this cool
Hmm.
shiny new thing, let's grasp at that one, but how does this fit? How does AI fit into our overall plan? What is our AI strategic plan? Again, maybe even lumped down to effectiveness and efficiency. Where are we going to
Hmm.
put energy that does those two things? Yeah, it's a really really cool idea. Awesome. This is there's a lot going on. I mean, both like
It
in terms
is.
of
It's.
AI and revenue enablement and shifts. And
Hmm.
I wonder. I'm going to close with this one. I wonder. Again, speaking with one of my guests a few weeks ago, he had mentioned that,
Hmm.
like, last year was, a lot of, we really don't know what's happening. Things are moving so quickly, a lot of uncertainty.
Hmm.
He
Hmm.
forecasts more uncertainty for 2024. How do you feel about that?
I don't know how he is defining uncertainty,
Yeah.
but all of my years in business, Brian, we've lived with uncertainty.
Right.
At any given time. The causes may be different,
Yep.
but I remember, especially when I got into tech sales, my first manager, I got HP was my first tech sales job, and
Yeah.
my manager said, welcome to tech sales. Now you live in dog years." And all these years later, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yes, we do.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree with that person. We are going. There are a lot of unknowns. It could be a roller coaster ride of a year, but we're coming off of one, and the year
Yeah.
before that we had another one of different. And I think that
Yeah.
we're getting more resilient. I think we're getting smarter about how we do things. Not saying we're there yet, not even close in some cases, but yeah, buckle up because 24 is coming.
Yeah.
But
It
but
is.
we've got this. I really feel like there's a lot of good work going on to help
Yeah.
too.
Cool. I really appreciate your time, especially this time of year.
Oh,
There's a lot going on.